likely is that, though? Let's talk to Robert Courts Casey. He's a former Tory MP, former Solicitor General and former Chair of the Defence Select Committee in the House of Commons. Very good afternoon to you, Robert.
Afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. So, look, it looks like we may get this first face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin as early as next week. First one since 2018, Donald Trump's first term. Do you think that is going to lead to any more likelihood of a ceasefire? Zelensky seems to think there is more hope than there was. But at the end of the day, has anything changed for Vladimir Putin?
Well, we'll always approach this with some trepidation, really, and I think the scales have fallen from the president's, Donald Trump's, eyes in terms of how reasonable and realistic Putin is. As we all know, that Putin is a bloodthirsty aggressor, and he is purely out for what is his interests or Russia's interests as he sees them. And if he doesn't get then he will take the view that he's already occupying a lot of Ukrainian territory. He is engaged in a war of attrition, which is the way that the Russians always fight. And if he isn't given what he thinks is in his interests, he won't come to the table.
Well, that's it.
And when he'll come to the table, but not actually make a deal.
Well, indeed. He'll string Donald Trump along. He's been stringing him along all this time. It does look hopeful that Donald Trump's patience has been wearing thin and perhaps has realised he's being made to look like a chump, which he has been by Vladimir Putin. But even when Donald Trump gave that original 50-day deadline for there to be a ceasefire, that was basically, it was 50 days when Vladimir Putin was hoping, over the summer months, he was going to be making a lot of progress in terms of taking, places like Kherson and other places in the Donbass region. The thought is that he may well come to the table once he's achieved the military ends he hopes he can realistically achieve, whilst the war is sort of bogged down as it has been in this, you say, this war of attrition. But fundamentally, even if you get Putin and Trump in the same room, and even with Zelensky there, with or without a suit on, at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin doesn't want to walk away with a defeat, does he?
Well, that's it. It's not only he doesn't want to, he can't, because his entire reputation, his political career, and indeed probably his actual life depends upon him being successful as he sees it. So he won't be able to walk away with anything that is acceptable, probably in anyone else's terms. When you put that against Zelensky's understandable desire to see his country liberated after everything they've been through, there's a real mismatch in what each side can see.
Yeah, and Donald Trump seems to think, and he said, he'd solved the whole problem in 24 hours. He's for peace, not war. Bang their heads together and everything will be fine. But it's just not how it works. And he does seem to think also that economic sanctions will make a difference. But they have such, Vladimir Putin thinks that Ukraine should be Russian, and Vladimir Zelensky thinks that Ukraine should be Ukrainian. I'm not sure there is any middle ground there, other than, OK, you get to keep Crimea, but would you get to keep some of the Donbass region as well? I mean, we're talking about 20% of Ukrainian territory being handed over to a hostile nation state. Even if that were something that Vladimir Zelensky could agree to, the Ukrainian people could suffer after all the bloodshed and hardship they've gone through, there needs to be a guarantee that Putin takes not a single inch more. And I'm not sure anyone would trust a guarantee, even by Donald Trump or by the European Union right now.
No, well, you shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't trust any guarantee that's been by Vladimir Putin. We've seen in the past how he behaves. He's very clear and open, actually, in reality of what he wants. He believes in a greater Russia, which maps more or less the same confines as the old Soviet Union. He wants to restore Russia to what he sees as its great place in the world, and he's utterly unscrupulous about what way he's going to go about doing it. The only thing really that can guarantee all of that is that the West makes it impossible, not just impossible for Russia to win, but makes it possible for Ukraine to win. Only when he's faced with the situation where he knows that coming to the table is his least worst option is he likely to do.
Indeed. Well, the economic sanctions make a difference. A lot of this is about the secondary sanctions, say, 50% tariffs on India. And there's still this talk about possibly going back up again for Chinese tariffs, but not just yet. And that's because we've got, sanctions from the West on the sales of oil and gas, which is where Vladimir Putin gets the money to fund his war effort from. They sell to India and China. And by the way, India then sells on to European countries. So I'm not even sure those sanctions really work at all anyway. But basically, we need to cut off his access to money. But the reality is, if we were really serious about this, we'd have done this already, wouldn't we?
Well, we've done a lot in terms of what the UK's done. I mean, international sanctions are really complicated, and initially we did a whole raft of everything that was quick and easy and straightforward to do. The problem, you put your finger on it a moment ago, because you talk about how people go around the outside. And if you look at Russia, for example, they have this vast shadow fleet, as it's called, which enables them to keep on selling oil. And you've got to keep working on the ways to constrict all of that. But you've got to, as you rightly say, it's the secondary sanctions, and it's working on those partners who aren't really aligned with one camp or another. You've got the West, who are fairly straightforward in terms of the action they'll take. Then you've got Russia and its allies, but there's a whole bunch of people in the middle, and it's people like India, where their interests are much, are in a grayer area, and it's working on them and getting them to take more action, which gives us the ability to starve off the money that's fueling Putin's war.
It does seem to me at this stage, I mean, was it February 2022 we had the invasion? It seems to me at this stage, there shouldn't be a single new sanction to be able to add on. They should have already been on and cut off those supplies. It seems to me that Vladimir Putin it's just in a war of attrition, as you say, and he's just basically waiting for the West to basically lose. We've lost enough weaponry, we haven't got enough money, we're all going to lose interest, we're all focused on Gaza now, and Donald Trump's going to lose interest as well, and basically he's just going to wait it out.
Yeah, I mean, we know that's the view that our adversaries take of us, that the West just can't focus its own attention on anything.
Well, they're right.
For a period of time. Frequently they are, yeah. I mean, that's right. Public attention moves on, some other scandal takes place, some other crisis blows up, and it could be another foreign policy crisis, or it could be domestic. And that's what happens. And it was, to a certain extent, the trouble with living in a democratic society, and, we wouldn't ever have it any other way. But,
there's a downside.
There's a downside in foreign policy terms, which is that we have to keep look at whatever happens now rather than the longer term.
And what about in terms of the other big foreign policy issue? I mean, Stephen Witkoff, the American president's golf buddy, and apparently envoy on everything. Certainly not an expert in any of these fields. He's also been dealing with issue in Gaza and dealing with Israel as well. What do you make of the leading global scholars, apparently, who have signed a letter urging the UK to end the ban and the proscribed terrorist status of Palestine Action?
It won't surprise you, I don't have any sympathy for them and have no time for anything they've said. I don't accept the view they are leading scholars, for one thing.
I have to say, I don't think they are, looking down the list of names.
Well, I don't think they are on those terms, but in any event, it's the same old hard left, self-hating, anti-Western cast that we've seen before. Look, it's pretty simple. You can think whatever you like about whatever you like, provided you do so peacefully. The minute you start damaging things or people, you're a criminal. And when you start taking action against the UK's national interest, then you become a terrorist. This move was absolutely right. Who'd know you'd hear me praising a Labour government, but they're absolutely right to have taken the action they have against...
I'm surprised they've taken it, I have to say.
Yeah, to a certain extent, so am I, because there are a lot of people who will be supporting them who frankly should know better. There's a lot of people within the UK who will be writing to their MPs right now and saying this action against Palestine Action ought not to take place. All that they're doing is protesting, and that is utterly misguided.
Well, I find it interesting. I'm not sure most people would have heard of this organisation before. What do you make of it? My guest Benjamin Butterworth in the studio a little bit earlier said, the thing is, you've got demonstration after demonstration. We had another 3 charges being brought today, but we've got lots of people. They're planning, I think, another day of action at the weekend. Basically saying we do support Palestine Action. Now that is currently a criminal offence to do that, and saying look, the police can't handle it. It makes a mockery of our laws because the police can't arrest everybody, and we know then they're not arresting everybody who's shouting outrageous anti-Semitic stuff and carrying placards and shouting slogans on those supposedly pro-Gaza marches that of course are, lots of them are hate marches. So does this make a mockery because the police don't take action and early enough, soon enough, with enough people?
Well, the police have got to be absolutely clear that they control the streets, and the minute that protesters get the impression that the police don't and they won't take action, then we'll simply get more of this. And you're absolutely right. That's precisely what we've seen with those hate marches over the course of the last 18 months or so. The people who are supporting Palestine Action have just got to be really clear about the sort of people that they are supporting. This is not some cuddly little protest group. This is a violent group that has taken action against people in the most violent and intimidatory terms, and they really should think very, very carefully about what it is they're supporting.
Let's also talk about, you worked in the Conservative government as Solicitor General, but what do you make of this extraordinary revelation that a whole hour of HMRC tax staff either working from home, so maybe they had to stop walking the dog for that moment, or in the office, was taken up on Wednesday by them attending a seminar on the guilt of being British. It was billed as a powerful, interactive and reflective listening circle exploring the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British, covering topics including the emotional weight of colonial history as part of the commitment to diversity, equity and inclusion, which I thought was particularly interesting given that the Chancellor, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, would have been a South Asian British man by heritage. I'm just not entirely sure that he ever felt he had to explore the emotional complexity of that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, this isn't just one event. There's a whole load of these things that are going on. It's what happens within the civil service network, and this is on work time. It's not like people are doing this after work and it's their own, their own views and they're free to explore them. This is when they're taking off time from running the country. And what we want is the people who are running the country to be proud of the country and to be advancing its interests.
But it's very telling, isn't it? How many people working in the public sector, it would appear, or I mean, maybe it's just their HR departments, but even anybody, you're working as a public servant to the British government, i.e. the British people, and you think that your country is a bad place and you should be guilty of being British and guilty and regretful of the colonial history of this country. I don't regret anything.
No. I mean, I'm very proud to be British, and our history is an outstanding one. We've done so much good in the world, and all sorts of things that we should be very proud of.
And less bad than a lot of other countries.
Absolutely right. When you look at British history, and we don't always get everything right because nobody does. That's human nature. But we're always trying to do the right thing. And actually, by and large, the vast majority of the time, Britain comes out very well or outstandingly of its historic history. I mean, we are the country, after all, that stood up against tyranny at huge personal cost.
And slavery.
Well, exactly right, slavery. This is the country that ended slavery and spent the equivalent in those terms to the entire amount we spent during the Second World War fighting Nazism on ending slavery. So we are the country that ended it, and that is the sort of thing that people ought to remember when they're looking at our history. But people, your viewers oughtn't to be under any illusion. I'm afraid this is common. This is a story that really hits the headlines, and rightly so. But this isn't by any means an aberration. We fought really hard when we were in government to stamp this stuff out.
Well, no, you say that. You say that. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Because it would have been really easy to just say, no, this stuff stops, full stop, doesn't happen during working hours. But the public sector unions and the permanent secretaries, they're fully signed up to this madness. You didn't do anything about it at all.
So I don't agree with that we didn't do anything about it, but you do put your finger on an important point, which is that where the control lies. And there's a big issue here about who governs this country. And more, lots of the questions we talk about on this programme and ones like it are where the power has slipped away from those who are elected to those who are not. This is just one example, but there's all sorts of others. We get it in migration. We get it in lots of what's called the woke agenda. And that is one of the biggest issues that we face, but people often don't understand because it's slightly academic, isn't it, when you're talking about it. I mean, unfortunately, one of the things you have to accept that when you're a government minister is that it isn't just a matter of you say something and it happens. You have to. There's a whole network of worlds and organisations that you have to work your way around. So
but that's the problem. That our public servants are no longer public servants.
So you can do it. If
but you shouldn't have to work around. They're activists.
Oh, sorry.
There shouldn't be. Your job when you are public, okay, if your job is to advise and give advice to ministers, that's absolutely fine, and do the numbers on it. But fundamentally, when given an instruction by a publicly elected minister, and I get it doesn't matter whether I voted for them or not, if they're democratically elected, your job is to do it, or you can resign.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And, that is the understanding that it has to be. And too often, you find that you have a resistance from people who see themselves as holding you to account. And you're not held to account by a system, you're held to account by the ballot box.
Yeah, absolutely.